Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to discuss the trailer that just came out for Batwoman. If you haven't seen it, I'll include a link to it in the description down below. But a lot of interesting things came up in the trailers, kind of giving me answers to some questions I had previously. Because I was wondering, like, okay, so like, are we going to get a flashback and stuff to kind of see how she became Batwoman, you know, because like by the time we meet Kate during Elseworlds, she's already been Batwoman for some time and everything. So I was curious about that, and obviously it seems like we're getting a full-blown origin story, like, because there's a whole conversation she brought up during Elseworlds where it's like, oh yeah, like Bruce / Batman has been going from Gotham for at least like 3 years. So I'm curious to see, is it going to be a time frame of us going all the way back those 3 years, or has Gotham been without Batman for those 3 years? I'm assuming that, since she kind of references that. We'll ultimately kind of have to wait and see where like the time frame and everything is. Because obviously, like I said, it's a full-blown origin story. Like, by the time we, at least from what we can see, because everything's most likely from the first episode, she doesn't even have the suit. She doesn't even know about Bruce being Batman, which, you know, that's kind of interesting, finding out, like, your cousin's a superhero like that. Which, obviously, that's something her and Kara kind of discussed a little bit during the Elseworld situation. Like, obviously, their family situation's kind of, you know, it's kind of interesting, too, when you actually think about it, because they're kind of both following in their cousin's footsteps in a certain way. So that's kind of interesting. Which, really quickly, I should point that out. I brought that up before. I was wondering if like them, like Bruce and Kate being cousins, was that something just specific to the show, or is that continuous to like the comic books? And it turns out Silver Age comic books, from what I was reading, it says like she kind of had a thing for Batman, but more other iterations have, you know, she's his cousin. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But circling back to what I was bringing up before I went on a tangent and everything, I am curious, like, at like what point are we getting, you know, her as Batwoman? Is it going to be like at the end of that 3 years, somewhere in between that 3 years? Like, is the first episode going to be like the origin story, and then like the rest of the season being her already established? Because like I said, Elseworlds already introduced her being Batwoman for a while and everything, so I'm curious to see how that and how they end up kind of utilizing that. Because it doesn't seem like they're going to do flashbacks, which I guess in the grand scheme of things it kind of makes sense, because that's always been just an Arrow thing. But it does seem like we are going to get bits and pieces to kind of understanding her life. Because something I brought up before I was curious about is like her training and stuff like that. I was like, we know typically Batman, you know, in certain continuities, it's like, oh, his training comes from like kicking it with like the League of Assassins or League of Shadows, whichever, you know, naming convention you want to go about. But it seems like her training comes from the military, which obviously her situation of being gay, like that obviously complicates things in the military. In fact, it seems like her and someone that's important to her, Sophie, were in the military together. Because we only get like a little bit of it in the trailer, so I'm interested to see where their story ends up taking us. Because I'm curious in this situation, who's going to be kind of like the respective, like Commissioner Gordon helping her out. Will it be her ex potentially, or will it be her dad? Because both are complicated elements to that whole situation. So I'm also curious, like, has she been away from Gotham the entire time? Like, because the whole question too becomes like, you know, because obviously I brought it up earlier, she didn't know about Bruce being Batman. I'm sure that's not something he's ever really talked about with anyone. And that's something, I don't know if I've ever really known that to ever come up in any Batman continuity, the whole aspect of his other family. Like, all you ever hear about is his parents dying, but outside of that, you never really hear about his extended family, at least, you know, across the stuff I've come across. Maybe even with the stuff I've seen or watched, you know, like maybe there's been references, like winks and nods towards his extended family, but it's just something I never really been thought about before. It never crossed my mind until this. I was like, all right, yeah, you have a cousin. Of course, you probably have extended family. I'm assuming it's going to be on his mom's side of things, but maybe it's his dad's, but I wouldn't assume so, just because, like, you know, the Wayne name kind of carries some weight and stuff like that, because obviously with Gotham, the Waynes being like a founding family and stuff like that. That's why I'm kind of like, I'm sure for her it's probably going to be like kind of that balance of like, oh yeah, I'm Bruce's cousin, but you know, you kind of have, it adds a different level, because obviously that was something Kara had to deal with at first, because it's like, oh yeah, you're Superman's cousin. It's like, no, I'm Supergirl. I do my own thing. I'm my own person. Like, obviously finding her own identity in all of this. Because to me, I think Kate's kind of got it a little steeper. Because we actually think about it, it's like, well, Bruce Wayne is this billionaire and everything, and obviously Batman is kind of abandoned, you know, Gotham City and stuff like that. Whereas at least, you know, when it comes to like Supergirl, it's like, well, Superman's still flying around, obviously kicking it in Metropolis and everything, but still, you know, it's just kind of interesting to think about. I'm also curious about who that dude is that obviously kind of works on the bat suit for her to make it hers, you know, instead of Bruce's. Makes you wonder, did he take any of the suits with him? I mean, it seems like he was just leaving everything related to Batman behind, just he couldn't take it anymore. At first I was wondering, is that supposed to be like Lucius Fox's son or something like that? But I'm like, at least based on like the Telltale Batman game, it's like he had a daughter named Tiffany. Not unless he had other kids that I just wasn't aware of. So that might just be someone that's just specific to, you know, he's someone that's tied typically to Kate's storyline. So it's going to be interesting to see what that ends up being about. So obviously he's going to be like, I guess kind of probably a combination of her Alfred meets Lucius. Like I said, not unless they do make it so that he is Lucius' son. Either way, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. And I've brought this up before. I'm curious, like, are we going to get any more of the other bats? I guess, you know, at the grand scheme of things, it all comes down to where in the continuity of Batman is this? Like, you know, has a lot of the Bat family already been established? Like, you know, obviously, which Robin are we dealing with? Are we dealing with Tim Drake, Jason Todd, Dick Grayson? I would assume we're not dealing with Damian Wayne just because of the whole, like, Talia situation, kind of like, because obviously this is set in the Arrowverse and everything, so I'm assuming that's not going to be the case because Talia doesn't have a kid, at least not that we're aware of in this continuity, but maybe she does. Who knows? We'll ultimately have to wait and see in that regard. I mean, it still leaves room open for, like, Batgirl, you know, which also depends on which Batgirl, because I found out, like, oh yeah, multiple people have assumed the identity of Batgirl. I didn't know that. The only Batgirl I've ever known has been Barbara Gordon. I had no idea who Cassandra Cain was until recently, fairly recently. So it depends on how they want to handle that. Because Batgirl still hasn't really popped up in any, like, TV shows or movies. To be fair, there is the whole, what is it, Birds of Prey situation I'm thinking of. Yes, that is connected to Batgirl in that regard. And going back to it, I keep circling back to it, I do apologize, but the whole aspect of, like, obviously the time frame and everything. So it's like, how long has Gotham been without a hero? Because that also ties into, like, the Bat family. It's like, obviously, typically they're all doing their own things. Typically, once again, depending on the continuity, whether it be Dick Grayson or Tim Drake, they're probably kicking up with the Teen Titans, whichever one is Robin at the time. You know, if it's Tim Drake, you know, most likely, you know, Dick's off, you know, being Nightwing. So, and once again, like, since I brought up Barbara, potentially, if we're in that continuity, are we going to see a Commissioner Gordon? Has he moved on? Has he passed away? Does that mean we'll lead more towards a more towards a Cassandra Cain type of situation? Obviously, this is just the first season, so obviously they're not going to go full blast. Like, it's just going to be her for a majority of the time, just kind of handling things on her own. So, which is fine enough on its own, but it's just, obviously, this stuff just kind of gets my brain working of like, oh, what does this mean for the future going beyond everything? So it's just where my brain is. And I've also brought the question up before of like, well, what the villain situation is going to be like. Obviously, which villains have been established? Is she going to have a lot of Batman villains, have her own villains? Because I'm sure she has villains that are specific to her, as well as, you know, probably pulling from a lot of the Bat family villains as well. Because I'd assume they all share a lot of the same villains. I mean, to be fair, like, obviously, you know, they could easily pull villains from other superheroes and kind of make it specifically Batwoman villains, because, you know, kind of using the Al Ghul's, for example, that's mainly a Batman storyline that was used for Arrow, so. And another thing, too, and once again, that whole aspect of me getting way ahead of myself, we also have to think about it. Let's not forget that the Crisis on Infinite Earths is coming up, too. What role will Batwoman potentially play in that, if any at all? I'm curious to see, will she kind of get included at it or not? I would assume so, but like I said, we'll have to wait and see. Like I said, once again, I'm getting way ahead of myself. But these are just some of the things running through my mind. In the comments down below, I'd love to know what you're thinking and what you're feeling. What are some things you want to see in the show? Some things you think we see in the show? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this video. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.